there are all these space tourists who have flown in to watch this amazing event. And so it's always funny to see people who are so excited about this thing that is very intimate to you, but to them, this is like a bucket list, like Super Bowl kind of event. They cannot wait. Some of them are wearing t-shirts with my husband's face on it. And then we're over here, the family members of the crew, very quiet because we're nervous and we're scared.
The Profile with Premier Christianity magazine.
Hello and welcome to The Profile here on Premier Christian Radio with me, Rachel Matthews. This is a show where we look at a person's life, faith and testimony. It's brought to you in association with the UK's leading Christian magazine, Premier Christianity. If you would like a free copy of the latest issue, featuring interviews, features, news reviews and more, then head to premierchristianity.com/free sample. My guest today is Stacey Morgan. On July the 20th, 2019, Stacey kissed her husband goodbye before he donned his spacesuit and headed to his waiting rocket. Within an overwhelming mix of pride, excitement and terror, Stacey and her children held hands and watched the rocket ignite and lift off for a 9-month mission to the International Space Station. Stories about outer space remind us that God is so much bigger than we can ever imagine. But Stacey's story reminds us that God is at the same time very near, personal, and always with us. Stacey told me her story and how she chose hope in the face of fear.
I currently live in Texas near Johnson Space Center because my husband is an astronaut, but we haven't always been we haven't always been an astronaut family. My husband and I have been married for almost 22 years. And so when we first met, a long time ago, we were very young. We kind of grew up together, but we started as a military family. We are still a military family, and that very much kind of shaped how our family views service and risk and sacrifice, both for our faith, for our country, for humanity. And so we were, serving in the military. That was actively our family lifestyle for a very long time until 2013, when my husband applied for and was accepted in the new class of astronauts that they were hiring that year. And so we moved to Texas, completely picked up our train and put it on a different set of tracks, but he is still active duty military. It is still obviously a high risk, service oriented and a lifestyle where the entire family really does serve.
I mean, when you described him to begin with, my husband is an astronaut. I mean, it's kind of, wow. But of course, as you said, there was that journey up to that point, that right. Relationship. So did you meet, were your families both having that military background? Is that where you met, or did you meet at school?
We met when we were both cadets at West Point, and my husband's family does have a military background. My family does not. So we kind of came there from two very different paths, and then, our paths intersected there. But that was a great place to meet. Looking back, we see how those, starting that way, starting our relationship, both of us in the military, it helped kind of set the stage of making sure we had this shared set of values, definitely for our faith, but also for what it really means to serve, not kind of this hollow, kind of easy term that we throw around, but especially after 9/11, the idea of service and risk and potential sacrifice and what it means for an entire family to serve completely shifted. And so that was it was foundational to our relationship and kind of our life going forward, having that shared experience.
Yeah, you mentioned that service and that sacrifice, and you talk about God within that. Have you always had a faith, or was there a pivotal moment in which you came to faith?
Well, we both grew up in the church. And so I would say when we met and we got married, that was already something that was important to us. I think as we got older, And as the world changed and my husband started deploying and into combat zones. And then of course, certainly when we've got down here and we're continuing to do kind of high risk things, you can't help but reflect on your faith, and it becomes real or not. I mean, you really, if it is not truly your foundation and something that you cling to, then when times get tough, it will fall away. And so we've had to make this choice. It's not a one and done kind of deal. It's something you have to continually commit to and trust God in and ask him to help you renew your faith and re-strengthen it, because every day that you wake up, the world is trying to, encourage you to let it go, or tell you that it's not real, or that you can't be God can't be counted on. And so it's something you have to choose to have hope in anew every single day. And we've had the opportunity in our life to have some real high risk moments where you are forced to really say, okay, in this moment, where is my hope? Like, what is the foundation of my life? Because if my foundation of my life is, if my identity is found in being married to this person, or the financial security that comes with this job, or not being having a partner, a spouse who is right here next to me. Well, when someone deploys, when someone goes to space, honestly, when someone just gets in their car and drives to work every day, that could be taken away from you. And so certainly in a launch countdown, when you're talking about a rocket launch, most people don't have a 10-second countdown to this moment where they kind of have to decide, is my faith truly real to me? Or is it just something culturally that I'm kind of holding on to, whatever? Is this truly central in my life? And for me, I've had those opportunities with deployment, but certainly at that countdown, when in 10 seconds, either this moment is going to be an incredible just moment for our family, or I'm going to become a widow. Like it's kind of no middle ground in that moment. And you have to decide, okay, if my happiness, if my peace is dependent on this rocket launch being successful, what does that mean if it's not successful? And so you kind of have to make a decision there. And so to me, that was just another moment where I had to make a decision, and my faith felt really tangible in a way that, sometimes doesn't always feel that way on a day-to-day basis, unless you're kind of in one of these high stress, real world faith application moments.
But tell me about Drew's position within the military and the various deployments that you'd experienced before he, what would we say, had a job as an astronaut before he
right.
falling. Yeah. Tell me, where have you been, and how had life been like prior to this very kind of momentous trip that he made?
So we've always been involved in the special operations community, and so certainly as most service members have done over the last decade, there were multiple deployments to Afghanistan, Iraq, different places in the world, kind of all part of those efforts. And so he had done multiple. We had experienced what it's like to kind of have a build up to a departure and then him be gone for months on end. And I would say one of the big differences between those combat deployments and this, what if you want to call it a space deployment, when he went to the International Space Station, was the level of visibility in what he was doing. Certainly we were used to him going away from home, me being a single parent with children at home. But in combat deployments, you don't see the moments of highest risk. You might hear about it. You might turn on the news and realize something's going on, but you're not going to experience it real time. And so there's a little bit of separation between the experience and what he's experiencing, what I was experiencing, because I would maybe hear about it secondhand after the fact on the news or from him later. In contrast, when he was in space, the moments of highest risk are launch, landing, and spacewalking, all of which are televised live, streamed over the internet. And I'm watching it live as it's unfolding with my children and the rest of the world at the same time. So that if something goes poorly, you do not have the you don't have the privilege of kind of processing that and experiencing it privately before sharing it with the world. And so one of the things I think I didn't fully appreciate till I experienced it myself was the level of added stress that public side of it brings to that moment, knowing, gosh, like this is a stressful enough event as is. And then add the fact that there are television cameras or it's being live streamed, and that you kind of have to think about that too in that moment of how would I react, what would happen, how would I manage this for the family, for the children, knowing that it would not be a private moment.
Tell me about what happened when Drew applied to be an astronaut.
Well, it's a very long process. And honestly, I certainly knew he was interested in space and things like that. But honestly, like, who isn't, right? I mean, we kind of joke like, yeah, well, I wanted to be a ballerina when I was a kid, just like you wanted to be an astronaut, but I kind of let that dream go a long time ago. But one day, it was just a regular day. He came home from work in kind of an uncharacteristically giddy mood, and he's not really a giddy guy. So he was very excited. He came right into the kitchen as I'm trying to make dinner. And he said, you're not going to believe this. I've just heard this huge news. NASA is opening the window for people to apply to be in this new class of astronauts. And I thought, like, why are you telling me this? we have this life over here. This we have planned this out. We have a multi-year plan here. We were supposed to move to Germany in about a year. That was going to be amazing. We were, I was going to eat pretzels and learn German and enjoy Europe. And I had all of these fantasies and expectations for what my next 5-10 years of my life are going to look like. So I don't understand why you are telling me this seems completely disconnected. And he said, well, I just want to apply. The likelihood of being selected is extremely low, which is true. So don't worry. He said, don't worry. Like, none of those plans are going to change. The likelihood of this happening, extremely low. And so I said, like, okay. And I went back to, fine, if you want to apply. And it was it kind of became a running joke, like, no matter what happens, you'll always be a NASA applicant. And that'll be so funny. This would be a funny story that we tell people, tell at Christmas around with family for years, how you applied and got rejected, except he didn't, he kept making it through every gate. And until about a year later, he got that fateful call that totally changed the direction of our lives. And we had to unravel everything that we had kind of set up we were literally supposed to be moving to Germany in a matter of weeks. It was we were supposed to be putting our car on the boat that would take it to Europe. And I said, Drew, we can't put this car on the boat because if we're not there to meet it, we will never see this car again. So we got to know what's going on. And literally within a matter of days from that, we got the call. And so I had to completely untangle and then replan everything for a move to Texas and a totally new way of doing life from that point out.
What's Drew's speciality? Has he got kind of any qualifications in kind of space or anything like that?
Well, he is a physician. And so when they apply, they certainly apply in different categories. And so he fell into that category. But all the astronauts are kind of cross-trained in everything. So once you get down here, your background kind of becomes less important as the training that they put you through once you get here.
What I'm finding really interesting about, as you share this, Stacey, is your sacrifice in this, because there is definitely, there's a calling and there's excitement in Drew for this possibility, and you and your children have to put aside all of your plans and follow what he wanted to do. Did you feel that at the time? Was that a hard decision to make?
It can be. I mean, I think this is something where our military background helped me get used to this idea that at some point when you're in a marriage and one person has a high profile or high stress job, like being in the military or certainly like being an astronaut, it's extremely hard. Like, both people can't be kind of pulling 100%, or you go nowhere and it causes problems. So at some point, somebody has to sacrifice in order, on behalf of the other person's career. And that has been me. And it often is for the spouses of military service people, astronaut spouses. Now, I think we are, as a community, the most resilient and adaptable people. We make the most of every place that we land. But there is absolutely a sacrifice in terms of having to restart with friendships and restart with careers. So many of my military and astronaut spouse friends are professionals, doctors, lawyers, business people, teachers. I mean, they're the most incredibly accomplished group of people I know. And yeah, this idea of having to put that aside if you're in the military and having to move to different places, or even down here, even though once you get down here to Texas, you do tend to stay for a while, so you don't have the moving, but you still sometimes need to maintain a level of flexibility in what you're doing because your spouse's job is so unusual. And so, yeah, the sacrifice is real. There is real challenges in that. Requires some humility and some real hard conversations about the negotiation and the push and pull of what that looks like in different seasons. But I've learned that kind of railing against the machine is not really going to help you. This is the lifestyle we've chosen, and it does involve sacrifice for the entire family, and that involves our children too, because even just for them, in both of these lifestyles, their dad is gone a lot, and they've just come to accept that that's just how it is. And a lot of their attitude about it comes from watching me and seeing what my attitude will be about it. And so I've always tried to say, like, this is what it is to serve, in whatever capacity, a police officer, a fireman, a military person, in any kind of government service. It often involves sacrifice, and the entire family serves. And that's something I think that most people are aware of, but it's kind of nice to have it acknowledged every once in a while, because it is hard. It's the tangible. Often we think about the tangible sacrifices, like, oh, you have to move a lot, or potentially, in my case, my husband could die and I could become a widow. And that is definitely a very risky and potential sacrifice on my part. But the intangibles of just the stress that happens at certain seasons, or the travel that takes people away from their families, and yeah, so it is the whole family really is involved. It's not really a career as much as it is a family lifestyle that you have to buy into.
Yeah, I really, really can imagine that, the way that you've described it. And I think that's interesting, because we often think about servicemen or service women and the sacrifice they make. But as you're saying, it's the whole family that makes that sacrifice together. You all are in, or it doesn't work. So Drew finds himself on board with the training to be an astronaut, and you lead up to this moment in 2019, was it, that you go with your children to watch him kind of, what do we say, blast off? Yes,
launch into outer space. Yes.
Launch into outer space. And she said that was wow, I could really feel it when you described it. It was a real, it was a marker, wasn't it? There was the before and there was the after. That's
right. And because I mean, it could be a movie, the way it plays out. I mean, my husband launched on a Soyuz rocket. That's a Russian rocket, because in 2019, the space shuttle had ended in 2011. And we, here in the United States, we didn't start launching SpaceX Crew Dragon capsules till 2020. So there was about a 10-year gap there, where the only way to get to and from the International Space Station was on a Russian Soyuz rocket. And the Russians launched their rockets from Kazakhstan. And so in order to go watch this rocket launch, the kids and I, along with a handful of some family and friends like Drew's parents and his brothers, flew with us to Kazakhstan. And it is a very different place than, say, coastal Florida, where where you might remember seeing space shuttle launches from, and where you see launches of SpaceX Dragon now. And so we're in this, the light is getting dim as the sun is going down. We're in the middle of this field, which feels like in the middle of nowhere. There are all these space tourists who have flown in in these tour buses from around the world, who are here to watch this amazing event. And so it's always funny to see people who are so excited about this thing that is very intimate to you, but to them, this is like a bucket list, like Super Bowl kind of event. They cannot wait. And some of them are wearing t-shirts with my husband's face on it and the crew patches. I mean, they're just so excited. I mean, this is just like a party, and they're cheering and they're high-fiving. And then we're over here, the family members of the crew, kind of on the other end of the field. We're very quiet because we're nervous and we're scared. And there's no big countdown clock. It's literally just, that the ground crew is going to light that rocket. In our case, at exactly, 9:28, not a minute earlier, not a second later. It's going to happen then. And either way, if the rocket launch is successful or not, life is going to be different afterwards, just like you said. And you don't really know what life will be like. Either way it goes, even if it's successful, which, thank God it was, you can't help but think about in the moment, and like a million questions flipping through your brain. Like, I'm about to be a single parent of 4 children, 2 teenagers, 2 tweens for 9 months. Like, do I have what it takes? Like that's a lot of hormones. That's a lot of drama from kids. And that's a long time to be single parenting by myself. I've never done it that long with these kids. Is our marriage going to suffer? What will the communication be like? What will his life be like? Is he going to be okay? Is this going to have long-term effects on his health? And then what, if that happened, what would that mean for my life? Is his relationship with our kids going to suffer? You just don't know. What if something happens while he's gone? A kid gets really sick, or someone, a family member dies. There's no coming home early. So it's all those unknowns that are really, really scary, because there's no way of knowing of what's going to come next. And so that's where I felt like God was speaking to me in that moment. Like, okay, you're feeling all these fears. This is normal. This is the human condition. We are naturally fearful creatures. But now you get to make a choice. Are you going to live in this mindset that is just reactionary to the world and afraid? Or are you going to rely on me and my hope and your faith in me, which is not dependent on whatever happens around you? It's not dependent on which way this rocket launch goes. It is not dependent on how good of a parent you are, or how strong your marriage is, or your attitude in that moment at every given time. Like, God says, I'm unchanging. I'm not going anywhere. You can rely on me, and I promise to be with you no matter which way this launch goes, and no matter what happens down the path, tomorrow, the next day, the next week, over the course of the next 9 months, and forever. And so that was a really, like, a very, there are times in your life where you just feel like God is really close to you and is just really kind of pressing in close, and in a way that maybe you don't feel when you're just like in the grocery store. And to me, that was one of those moments where it was like, okay, I'm hearing you. I feel you speaking to me in this moment and giving me this choice. And I can't not make a choice. By doing nothing, I will choose fear. So instead, I'm going to choose to have hope in a God who will be with me no matter what happens in the next 10 seconds.
Drew was away for 9 months on the International Space Station. Tell me about life for you during that time. What was it like to be here on Earth, knowing he's in space, and how you began to comprehend that, and what happened to you?
There are definitely periods and moments that feel very surreal, because life is, of course, like any time when you have kids, it feels like life is moving at an extremely fast pace, and you blink and a kid has outgrown another pair of pants because they've grown another 6 inches, and relationships are shifting, and there's school pressures and all kinds of things. And so it was an interesting parallel, because you've got life moving extremely quickly, constantly changing down here on Earth. And then I'm talking to my husband on pretty much a daily basis, and life, his routine is very structured. It's a very everyday, kind of feels very similar. They don't have the cues of sun, they have 16 sunrises and sunsets every day. There's no change in weather. There's no wind, there's no rain, so their environment is very static every day. And so often he felt like time was moving very slowly, and yet down here it felt like time was speeding up, because you just have all these kids and all these changes, and of course just the seasons and everything that we're used to. And so it was a difference in how we kind of felt the experience. 90% of my time is the stress of single parenting that any single parent person who's, whether that's temporary or permanent, can understand. Just keeping the boat afloat, right? What's for dinner? Who's getting kids off to school, getting to work, getting home, maintaining a house, maintaining a yard, all those kind of things that were now 100% on me as the only adult in the house. But then every once in a while, there'd be this surreal moment, like watching a spacewalk, where I would go in to mission control and I'd sit there and watch, my husband doing these, like this seems impossible. It seems like you're watching a movie. Like, how can he be in space? Or about 4 times, the space station passed overhead, and you see this looks like a star moving in a straight line, like a bright star. And you only see it for maybe a minute as it passes overhead. It's moving very quickly. But I'd stand out in the yard and you see this passing overhead and you think, like, is this for real? Because it's this little dot of light, like a star. But it's like my husband is in that dot.
So much is shallow these days. Pictures, but not words. Texts that seem impersonal. Tweets rather than conversation. It can leave us all feeling rather empty. At Premier Christianity, we go deeper to bring you a thought-provoking and credible mix of theological articles, biblical interpretation, interviews, debates, and trends. Premier Christianity, online, in print, in depth. Subscribe today at premierchristianity.com.
You're listening to The Profile.
Welcome to the second part of The Profile here on Premier Christian Radio with me, Rachel Matthews. In the first part of the programme, we heard about Stacey's husband's journey into space for a 9-month mission on the International Space Station. In this second part, we hear more about Stacey's own journey with God.
But it's like my husband is in that dot, and because of the time difference, I knew that if I'm standing in my yard at night, then he's asleep, floating in a sleeping bag that is strapped to the wall so it doesn't float away. And it was just it's like trying to ponder infinity. Like, it's true, but it just, your brain is just having a really hard time wrapping itself around the idea that he's in there. We would do about once a week, we have a video chat with him. And to see this guy that I've known for 20 years, who just a few months ago or a few weeks ago, even, arguing about who's emptying the dishwasher or reminding him to take the trash out. And here he is literally doing somersaults in zero gravity and floating M&Ms into his mouth. You just think, like, what is this life? This is so strange. And yet the call ends and it's back to the daily grind and who needs help with homework and what's for dinner. And so it is such that the astronaut family life it's such a weird combination of the surreal, but also the mundane.
Did you feel at all vulnerable and need others to kind of come around you during that time?
Absolutely. I mean, definitely getting comfortable with vulnerability. That's not something I think most people do well. Certainly, same for me. I like to do things on my own. It seems faster. It seems easier. I don't want to inconvenience anyone. I want people to think I've got my act together and that I can handle it all. And I think in my mind, I knew, everybody knows that they should be open with their friends and ask for help and receive help when it's offered. But putting that into practice is not always easy. When Drew was gone for that length of time in that weird and just surreal season, I had no choice. I had to finally put these things I've known in my brain into my heart and put them into practice. And so, yes, surrounding myself with people, because it is lonely. There's not a lot of people on the planet who can fully appreciate the unique season I was in. And that's why we often, as other astronaut spouses, we get together and we like to hang out with each other, because there aren't very many people who understand. Even the most caring and wonderful friends and family, they're never going to fully understand the experience because they're not experiencing it in the same way you are. So it can be very isolating. It can be lonely, just like anytime you're alone, the only parent in the house, it can be very lonely. I lost my companion, and there were times I really was lonely, and times when I had to make really hard parenting decisions or financial decisions or whatever. And you just think to yourself, like, man, I just want another adult to kind of bounce this off of, because I don't like that my choice is I get to be the 100% decision maker, which is both freeing, but also stressful because it's totally on your shoulders. And sometimes because of the time difference, the space station operates under Greenwich Mean Time. So for here in Texas, that meant he was always 5 or 6 hours ahead. So pretty much any time after 4 p.m. my time, he's going to be asleep. So half of the day, if something happens and I need to make a decision, like that's it. I'm the only one. And so it is stressful, and you do need people who you can trust to come alongside you, and you can ask for help. And the friends who showed up without me having to ask, I mean, just incredible friends who offered to help with big things like, big projects or things at that house that just, I needed another adult set of hands to lift something or move something. But also, my son was learning how to drive, taking him out to drive, the things that I just didn't have time for, or bringing me meals, or sometimes just, sending me a text message or a card, or showing up and saying, let me just hang out with you. No agenda, not trying to fix anything, just to spend time with you. Invaluable. Absolutely. I could not have done it without them, because it's hard. It's really hard. And something that I think a lot of people now have experienced in the pandemic, how easy it is to isolate yourself, but how lonely and difficult life becomes when that happens. And so kind of overcoming our inertia and saying, okay, I am going to get out of my house. I am going to pick up the phone and call that friend. I am going to ask somebody for help. Or when someone offers it, I am going to say, thank you, and just receive it and let them pour into me in this season. Like, I think this idea that in every season, for every giver, there must be a receiver. And in this season, I was the receiver, and I needed to just accept that. I'm far more comfortable being a giver. But sometimes it's your turn to be the one who receives the love and support and care. And once you kind of get open to that, I found, it's like anything that you practice. It takes practice, and you get more comfortable with it. And then after a while, you think like, gosh, why was this so hard for me? Like, this should be something that I want all the time, not just in difficult seasons, but this kind of level of friendship and connection and support and love in my community and my friends. Like, I should want this all the time. And I can have this all the time. I don't have to be backed up against the wall to actually have this in my life all the time.
I'm really thinking about Jesus and the disciples as you describe that, about finding your people, about being vulnerable, about accepting help. How did your faith change and develop over those 9 months?
Well, I think you hear God differently when you are in a season of hardship. I think there is an opportunity when you are in a challenging season. The opportunity that you find there is that if you, instead of just trying to barrel through it on your own and just kind of struggle, if you take a moment to say, like, God, I'm struggling right now. Like, this season is really hard. I think if we soften our hearts, he draws nearer to us in that season, and we are more willing to allow him to draw closer and meet us where we are than, say, in seasons where everything feels like we are just killing it and everything's going great. And so to me, just a lot of these little lessons and these things that I know God had taught me over the years, that I knew in my head, but I really had not put them all together in my heart. That was really, I think, one of the best gifts of this unique season, was putting all these lessons that God had been trying to teach me for 40 years into practice. And so all these, like God saying, like, hey, I am here to comfort you. And that happens both through prayer and through reading about me in your Bible, but also I will bring real people to you. Like, that there is a real, because, he knows that, yes, we need comforting words, but we also need comforting hugs, and we need someone to hold our hand. Like, that's how we are created, to need a companion. And so he does, he brings those people to us, and really challenging every day. Like, okay, every morning I have to choose to rely on God. Like, and that isn't a one and done, like, oh, well, I made that decision 10 years ago, so I'm all good. Like, every day now should just be easy. I should just be able to just have 100% faith in God. And that's where I find my hope, no matter what happens. But every day you get up is a challenge. And so every day you have to choose before you start your day, almost, to say, okay, God, no matter what happens today, I choose I choose your hope. And it's not an easy box check. I kind of describe it as like, it's almost like a blanket you have to choose to pick up and wrap around yourself every morning. Like, I'm going to wrap myself in this hope and your promises that you are here with me, no matter what the rest of this day, whatever happens today, good or bad, I know you're here with me. And I certainly could not have been as open to accepting help. I wouldn't have been as open to hearing what my friend, what his words through the mouths of my friends were telling me in this season. Without that faith, it would have been extremely difficult, and it would not nearly have been like the meaningful season that it was for both me and my kids and all of my family.
It's interesting that you describe that season at times as a season of hardship. And we wouldn't think that, would we? We would think from the outside looking in, wow, what an opportunity for your husband. How exciting. But I'm guessing it's what you had to hold together, that there was all of that, but with it was that fear. Would he land safely? Would that spacewalk go okay? You were always living on the edge. And how have you've talked about God and pressing into him, but how do you live with that tension day to day, being married to someone in the military, being married to an astronaut?
Right.
How do you live with it?
I think the first step is coming to the understanding that life can be both good and hard at the same time. I think often we like to try to just make it black and white, like, oh, well, my life right now is just hard, or my life right now is awesome. And it's kind of like the social media kind of like, well, this, whatever, what face do I want to put on? Should I be in a pity party, or am I just like having just a party? And the reality is that life is both. I mean, it is, that season and every season of my life, it's full of opportunities and challenges. And it's okay to say, this was like, today is really hard, but at the same time, like I have a home, and I have food to eat, and I have healthy children. Like, that is, like, the fact that I just woke up this morning is a blessing. Like, that's a good thing, but my day can still be hard. and you can live a great life and it still have hard moments. And that does not negate, like one feeling does not negate the other. And so I think the first step is saying, okay, like life is both, and accepting that it's both, because then now you can move forward saying, all right, like knowing that there's both, I can manage both and I can accept both. So there's, I think about how, like you said, some people assume like, well, every day in space must be amazing, right? They're just doing somersaults, like it looks so fun. And that's true, but they also have really hard days. Just like, I think when my husband first deployed to combat, people assume that every person, like every soldier, cannot wait to get home. Like that must be the worst experience ever. And they are just counting the days till they can come home. And they certainly are, but they're also having a good time. Like they're also bonding with their teammates, and it's an extremely meaningful and purposeful time, and will be a touch point in their life for the rest of their life. And there's a camaraderie and a purposeness to their life that is hard to find in other ways. And so it's not surprising that a lot of military people kind of look back at deployments as, kind of like wistfully, because there was a simplicity, there was a purpose, there was a mission, and there was a camaraderie that maybe they don't have when they're back at home. And so, even in a combat zone, hard, but also full of really good things. And then kind of flipped on its head here, when you go to space and for the families back home, amazing, unique opportunities that certainly are, not everyone gets to experience, but also really hard. So like, would we do it again? Absolutely. Was it also super challenging and one of the most challenging seasons of our marriage, of my parenting, of life? Absolutely. Both. But it can be both. Saying that it's hard doesn't mean we don't support the mission. Saying that it was challenging doesn't mean it wasn't also full of amazing opportunities.
I love how you've explained that. That's really, really helpful for the times we find ourselves in now. I'm wondering, has there been a particular Bible verse or a story within the Bible that has anchored you through these difficult seasons where there have been good and bad, as you say?
So my favorite verse of all time is Esther 4:14. I love it so much. I have it actually tattooed on my wrist. So I guess it should be my favorite verse. And the reason I love it is, I love the story of Esther so much because it feels very real to me. When you read the story, God is not an active, like it feels like it could be my life in terms of God is there. He's in the story. He's certainly speaking into people's life, but like it is for us today, he's not a tangible character, like walking through the story. There's no pillars of fire. There's no burning bushes of, with his audible voice, but he's clearly moving through the circumstances and presenting, real people with real options. And that's how I feel, that feels very real to me in my life. Like God is always here offering me options of how we're going to respond, whether it was there at the launch, like, okay, this rocket's about to launch. How are you going to respond in this moment? Are you going to cling to me, or are you going to cling to your fears? And I feel like that idea has carried through, both that season and now, even in this weird season we find ourselves in this pandemic. The world is really just off kilter, and there's a lot of scary things going on, and people are very uncomfortable and afraid because a lot of the things that we had built our lives on, whether that was your job, the economy, a certain politician, certain freedoms you thought you had that now feel like they've been taken, like when those things went away or changed, if that was what you built your life on, things now feel upside down. And when people feel upside down and like they don't have a firm footing anymore, they get very afraid and they start lashing out. And that's the anger and the discomfort and just all of this angst that we feel kind of like globally right now, I think is because for most people, their feet that used to be, they used to feel like they were on solid ground, now feel like they just are tossed and they don't know where to put their feet. And so this idea of choosing a God who is unchanging, that choosing to hope in a God who is not does not change by the circumstances. He's not surprised by things that happen. He is dependable. He is the only thing that we can cling to that will not change with whatever is happening in the world. And so I certainly was clinging to that during his mission. And then little did I know that, right at the end of his mission, Drew would come home at what we now know was kind of the ramp up to the pandemic. And it has just been, continuing to be my lifeline. And so that verse in Esther 4:14, it is where Esther has been given a choice, and her uncle, he says, you need to do something, and she has a choice, and that's what I love about that story is. And nobody's forced to do anything. They have a choice, which it feels like today we all have a choice every day. And she hesitates. And I think that's how most of us are. We hesitate because we're like, oh, I don't know. Like in that moment, it's not so easy sometimes to just make the hard choice. And so this verse is her uncle's response when he senses that hesitation in her, that natural hesitation. And he says, who's to say you haven't been put here for right now, right here? This is the moment God has placed you in this crossroads, and you've got a choice. And so she kind of takes a moment and she makes her choice. And then she says, the most, boss words I've ever heard, which is, if I perish, I perish. And I feel like that's kind of the attitude that God wants us to have, kind of this, it's hopeful. It's a hope and a faith that God will carry her through to do what she needs to do. But it's the 100% belief that even if it goes not the way she wants, she certainly doesn't want to die. She wants, things to play out the way she wants. But if it doesn't, she will trust that that's part of God's plan, and God will enable her to do what must be done, or that she will be part of what God's plan is. And if she perishes, she'll perish. And so coming out of the mission into this pandemic where everything feels upside down, I feel like, we're all given this choice. How are we going to respond? We've got a choice. Are we going to choose fear, or are we going to choose hope? Every morning, I'm gonna force myself to choose hope, and sometimes it doesn't feel easy to pick it up because the fears are just so tangible. And just when you feel like you've got a grasp on the way the world is working, the next morning you wake up and everything has changed again. And so it is very easy to be scared and just live in that space. But to choose that hope and say, "Listen, God, just tell me the next step to take." And I saw this quote recently and I love it. And it was talking about how we all want God to give us like a map with like every single step we should take. And instead God gives us a compass, and he just says, just keep walking north. Right. And it's like, but I want to know the path, like, show me the path, show me the steps. I want to know like the next 10 steps. That's what I really want. And he's like, oh, that would be, well, I'm not giving you that. I'm giving you a compass, and I just need you to head in the right direction. And so, my prayer every day is like, God, help me choose hope. Help me head in the right direction. And if I perish, I perish, but I'll perish knowing I was headed in the right direction and that I was going where you wanted me to go. And that takes a lot of guts. My prayer is like, give me the gutsy hope of Esther. She is such a boss. She is so gutsy. She feels like such a modern woman in that moment. And I love it. I hope I could be more like her, which is why I've tattooed it on my wrist, where I can look at it and remind myself of what gutsy hope really looks like. Well, when the opportunity came to write the book, I really, I never anticipated that would happen. But when it did, and I sat down and kind of started putting some words on paper, it was really kind of a neat moment to see like, wow, there really have been these threads of things that God has been teaching me for literally decades. that have carried through. And these are helpful, not just to me, but I think you can see them in these stories. And of course, I love reading other people's stories, and stories I just learn a lot better from story than I do from, preaching or someone trying to teach me something directly. Like, I want to hear your story. And so I'm writing them all down. It was really exciting to see those threads and realize, I think this could really speak to how everybody's feeling right now. Of course, when I was writing it, I didn't know we would still be in this pandemic, in this world situation. I kind of naively thought, like, oh gosh, I hope some of these things still resonate. I had no idea that we would still be in it now. But it's been so great to have people read the book. It's called The Astronaut's Wife. It's available wherever you buy books. Certainly shares kind of that inside story, kind of behind the scenes of what it's like for an astronaut family, but pulls in these stories from our experiences over the last 20 years, from deployments, from just regular family life, where God really stepped in and helped me learn what it really means to choose hope, or to find friends who I can be vulnerable with, and how not to stay in survival mode forever, which I think is also a real temptation right now, just, getting down into the grind and never coming back up, and how to communicate and not isolate ourselves, all these things that I think certainly I put into practice during Drew's space mission, but I continue to put into practice now, and I think would be helpful. And I hope it encourages people to see they are not alone. Certainly aspects of my story are unique, but I hope they find it relatable to wherever they are in their life right now, because these struggles really are universal. And I think God has something to say about these very real human struggles that we're all experiencing right now. So if people want to buy the book, The Astronaut's Wife, available wherever they buy books, I appreciate their support. I hope they love it.
That's all we've got time for on the profile this week. You can join us again next week. I thought it would be really lovely to end today's programme with Stacey leading us in prayer.
Lord, we pray for people of the world today who are feeling afraid, who are looking at the circumstances that they find themselves in, and it's just full of unknowns and danger, and they're not sure where to turn. And we pray that they will, in that moment, turn to you. And I pray for the mothers who are afraid, not just for themselves, but for their children that they are holding close to them. That fear that is so tangible, both there for physical safety, but also for their family and their mental health, and for what the future holds. So we pray that in their fear, that they would feel your peace, that they would feel your comfort, and that they would take refuge in that no matter what circumstances they find themselves in. In your name, amen.
You've been listening to The Profile in association with Premier Christianity Magazine.
I'm Sam Howes, and you have been listening to the Profile Podcast. Really hope you enjoyed that interview. There's loads more where that one came from. Over 200 interviews with different Christians from all walks of life available now on the Profile Podcast, and new ones coming each and every week. If you have been enjoying these interviews, we would so appreciate it if you could take just 5 seconds to give us a rating and a review wherever you found this podcast. It helps other people to discover the show. So why not do that now? Give us a rating and a review, and we'll see you next time.